The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Tell Us Why, a podcast for the financial freedom community. If you're looking to succeed in your quest for financial freedom, make sure you join us every week as we, along with our guests, discuss different stories of success, how they were achieved, and how you can do the same. And of course, we ask them to tell us why. Here are your hosts, Jack and Mike.
Welcome to the Tell Us Why podcast. I'm your host, Jack Darnapple, here alongside my co-host, Mr. Michael Ketchen. Today we are talking with Carson Hess. Carson is an entrepreneur and founder of Development AI. Development AI is a tech startup. Oh, no big deal, Silicon Valley, sexy, Zuckerberg. But they service the best development opportunities in the greater Boston area and potentially something else that we're going to announce to our listeners later today.
Breaking news.
Breaking
I like
news.
breaking
no
news.
Big deal. But I'll let Carson explain what that means and how you can benefit once we get him in studio. But before we do that, Mike, what's going on in the business?
Big news. Big news. Yes, we are closing, it looks like, officially on a big deal we've been working on for a couple of years. And as we've done
I remember hearing about that like 3 years ago.
It's insane. So one thing we're going to do, as we do with other deals, we're going to be giving the peek behind the scenes. So make sure you're checking us out on Instagram, TikTok, our Facebook group, our Facebook page. We're really going to show the community, the Tell Us Why community, how we reposition this 100-plus unit building. So it's going to be pretty cool.
100+, that's legit.
Yes.
That's legit.
I feel like I'm official. Moving on up, you know. What about you? What you got going on?
So really I've been working on advancing my teams like accounting and business systems, going through a bunch of refinances, so I want to have that data on demand.
Oh, boy.
But also I want to establish KPIs and really monitor what I'm doing.
To grow it, scale it.
So
Yep.
I want to have those numbers readily available. I want to go over them with my bookkeeper. Like, she's coming in to do a lot more work than she has historically, because historically it's been once a year around tax season or whenever I needed something.
Transition from hobby to business.
Yeah, exactly.
We
So
talk
really
about.
trying to get that ramped up. And
Well, speaking of ramp up, I think the guest we have today, I met him when he was kind of kicking off. And to see where he's at today, I always get excited, but I'm pretty excited for today's guest. Before we bring him in here, should we hear who this week's episode is brought to us by?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Are you sick of being treated like just another number by large insurance companies? Do you want a more personalized experience with somebody that you can trust? With Keith Monteith, that's exactly what you'll get. Keith is an experienced professional who can design an insurance plan tailored to fit your specific needs. With access to over 30 insurance carriers, Keith is able to shop numerous markets to find a price that works for you. So if you want an insurance agent that you can rely on and one that has your best interests at heart, then call or text Keith today on 978-241-2363. That's 978-241-2363. Keith Monty. He'll get you covered.
All right, so Carson Hess is live and in studio. Carson experiences ranges from working as a project and an engineer on federally funded rail transit projects in Denver and Boston, and co-founding the real estate technology firm Development AI.
Yes.
Development AI is a platform that helps real estate investors unlock value add through zoning and conduct extensive research and direct seller outreach campaigns. I don't understand why I can't read.
I don't know.
I'm trying to make this as natural as possible. It's embarrassing. So, Carson, welcome to the Tell Us Why podcast. Why don't you do a better job of explaining that than I can? Oh my God, I don't know what my deal is. It's like reading from the class in like third grade. I don't know.
Bail him out, Carson.
The scripted one. But I guess as a first aside, I mean, it's just awesome to be here with you guys.
Thank you, man.
I've known you guys for pretty close to 2 years now. Pretty much ever since we started Dev AI, and just been a tremendous resource for us. And, also love what you guys are doing with Tell Us Why. I've started following you guys since day one. I knew right away that this was going to be something that was huge, and was just thinking like, man, what do I have to do to get on this show?
Here we are.
Hang out with these guys.
So here it is.
So
Making
I really
dreams
appreciate
come
you guys
true
having
here.
us on. Yeah.
Hey, well, I kind of said at the beginning, and I'll say it again, and we'll get to it, but what I always like, and we kind of talked a little bit about Axel, previous guest, and one great thing about this community that we're trying to build is also talking to guys like yourself, like you mentioned, like when we met, I mean, I think I was just so excited for you and what you're doing, and, telling the people a little bit about where you're at, but really taking this journey of scaling and starting and leaving. What do we always talk about? The safety of the corporate job and the conversations. Carson, you're crazy. That college degree, you know. But to get into it, why don't you tell people where you're at today in all your endeavors, and specifically development AI, and what's going on? What is your day-to-day like now? Where are the companies at?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll just mention, too, you guys mentioned earlier that I was a founder of DevAI. I'm one of the co-founders. So our other co-founders, Kevin Woods.
Shout out, Kevin.
Wasn't able to make it today. He's down in New York. But basically where we're at is we are a platform for real estate developers. We look at zoning data. So we pull in zoning maps, whether they're in GIS format or they're in PDF format, which is how most zoning maps around the United States are. And the problem is that if you want to develop multifamily or you want to develop really any sort of real estate in the United States, there's zoning rules that you have to abide by.
Yes, there are.
So you have to look first at where properties are zoned.
Yes.
Right. Every municipality has a different. All the data is in a different place. DevAI brings that under one umbrella, homogenizes it. So our interface is going to look the same whether you're in Cambridge, Massachusetts, you're in Salem, New Hampshire, Boston, Massachusetts, anywhere that we have our data scaled out to, it's going to look the same.
That is just insane.
So we go everything from zoning data down to then assessor data. So we'll look at, hey, I want to build multifamily. Where are opportunities that are maybe zoned multifamily but currently being used as single family or as residential land? I want to build a storage warehouse. Where can I find something that I can build storage by right or by special permit and limit my entitlement risk? Then the next layer is sort of who owns these properties and how do I get into contact with them? So that's development in AI in a nutshell, is the comprehensive zoning and outreach platform for real estate developers, real estate investors as well. As we alluded to earlier, there is a new product launch that's coming that you guys as listeners will have exclusive beta access to called Land Zoning, landzoning.net.
Can we link to that? We'll make sure we get the link. We'll get that in show notes, promote in the community.
Subscribers.
I like it.
Special link or promo code. We haven't exactly decided yet.
I like that.
But basically from that, that's going to have just the zoning piece. So you'll be able to look at whether you're in Salem, Mass, Salem, New Hampshire, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Malden, Massachusetts, wherever it is, you'll be able to see the zoning. You'll be able to plug in an address. Say you get a deal across your desk. You're like, wow, this is a really nice lot. I wonder what I can do here. You'll be able to just plug that address into our system, and the output will show you what the zoning is in just a couple of seconds. So that's a platform that we're going to scale, and we're going to provide in every major.
2 addresses I can think of.
Jack's using the promo code as we go.
We could pull it up.
Right, Jake?
Yeah. And speaking to that, and
Jake's giving the thumbs up.
Jake's ready to go.
Yeah. He knows what I'm talking about.
Executive producer Jake trying to buy assets, not liabilities. One of the reasons that I think with what you just said is so important, and I want to zoom out. I want to put you on the spot with a big macro question we talk about. Obviously, anyone paying attention to real estate in the United States right now, all the buzzwords are supply and demand. There's a housing shortage. I mean, there's things going on. I want you all to go back and listen, and then we're going to have Carson touch on it. You are able to tie this together because what happens is, and I think a lot of people on the outside don't really realize why we've made all these technological advancements. We're doing all these things that are unbelievable. I mean, we're sending the people, to space. It's unbelievable. It still comes down to building and repositioning housing on a very local, really controlled, small government basis. And the amount of hoops you have to jump through and the time and the deployment of capital, you guys are really streamlining that process for the country.
I
mean, put that
this
is
I could
insane.
go off on a tangent for an hour about the municipalities and how the housing shortage, I think, in my humble opinion, is due to having to jump through so many damn hoops.
It's a
I don't
huge
know why
part
I
of it.
didn't say God, but said damn. That was weird. But
It's almost as bad as the reading.
but there's so many hoops that you have to jump through, and then if you're in one town, you go to the next town, it's completely different.
Completely different.
Well, and can you kind of speak to that without going too in depth, because that's what we want to focus on. But did that kind of lead to the need, and is that really the opportunity you guys see as a startup? Is that kind of what drew you to Development AI?
That's part of it. Basically, how Development AI got started is I mentioned my co-founder partner Kevin Woods earlier. Him and I met at a meetup.
Yep.
And he is a software engineer by trade. We got together at a meetup, and he was like, "Hey, I'm working on this tool that would show me what can be built on any parcel." And I'm like, "That is the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life, and how do I help?" And we ended up getting involved that way.
That's awesome.
But to your question earlier about just the housing crisis in general, obviously development and the lack thereof is a huge part of that. There's a number of variables that go into it. But certainly one of the biggest is the fact that it's so hard to build. Just like you said, the regulations that you have to go through.
Yes.
And that's where a service like us can really provide a tremendous amount of value. Just as like a simple exercise for everybody listening, if you own a single family home, you own a 2-family home, go to your city's zoning map, try to figure out what your parcel is zoned. That's step one. That's going to be hard. If you haven't looked at a zoning map before, that alone is going to take you a while. It might not even be oriented the right way, right? Like Lynn, Massachusetts, for instance, the city kind of sits like this, but if you look at their zoning map, it's like this. So there's even like a rotational thing you have to deal with. You have to look at all these different cross streets. It's a color-coded PDF. That's just step one. Step two is, okay, now I know what zone I'm in. I'm in residential A, B, C, industrial, whatever it might be. Are you in an overlay zone? That's another question. Maybe you're in an overlay zone that's for multifamily development. Maybe it's one where there's certain historical requirements that you'll have to jump through as well that just kind of add compounding factors to the difficulty of building. Step two is looking at the zoning ordinance. So you'll look at your table of use regulations, your table of dimensional restrictions, and it's what uses are actually allowed by right in the zone that I'm in. It might be the case, in a city like Malden where I live, for instance, most of the housing stock, almost entirely the housing stock, outdates the zoning code. So the zoning code was written kind of retroactively around, hey, here's kind of where the single families are, here's kind of where the two families are, the commercial stuff's this main street right here. Understanding what you can build through reading a zoning ordinance is really hard. Really hard. You have the tables, that's great, but there's also, some zoning codes are 800-900 different pages. Like Portland, Maine, for instance, it's like an 800-page document. There's all kinds of little gotchas in there about, hey, if you're on this specific street and your lot size is between 6,200 and 7,300 square feet, then you can't build an addition that has an FAR that's like 0.24.
And this is one of the reasons I got so excited the first time I met Carson. In fact, I tried to write him a check and see if he was raising capital, selling equity at that point. I brought it up again today. It was because where my brain went right away is problem solution. And I believe as entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, what we're really doing, regardless of whatever medium you're in, you're really solving problems and you're adding value. And I saw right away, I'm like, you're making attorneys' jobs easier. You're making engineers' jobs easier. You're making local home builders. You're making developers. You're streamlining processes which can overcome these inefficiencies. But as we're sitting here, I think the other thing we're doing is there's an opportunity to educate the general public. And where that becomes important is putting some pressure and really solving some of these problems. There's not a lack of housing inventory because developers don't want to build it. I assure you that is not the reason. Capital will be deployed when there's a return to get. So zooming back out, talking about that from a startup standpoint, what have been, Jack and I were launching Tell Us Why. It's an early startup. As real estate investors, we're deeper in the game as a startup. You're our first kind of techie, if you will, tech guy, who also ties into real estate. What has that been like? What kind of tips and actionable items can you share with the community? What is it like on the tech startup side of things?
Yeah, it's really interesting, not only being more on the tech side, and granted, I'm not super technical. My business partner, Kevin does 100% of the coding. I'm just
We'll definitely get Kevin on a later date, hope to. We'd love to get his side of it too.
He'd be amazing for you guys to talk to. Being on the tech side is also interesting from the real estate perspective. My background was kind of in construction management. I'm an engineer by training, not a computer engineer, but I did go to school for mechanical engineering, and so I understand sort of like tech from a basic high level from like a technical perspective. My background was in real estate before that, so both my parents were brokers where I grew up in New Jersey. While I was going to engineering school, I was licensed as an agent in New Jersey, was helping
So you've kind of always had your,
and I always, I was also listening to Bigger Pockets podcasts all the time, and I had this vision of being a full-time real estate investor. And obviously, as you guys know, things don't always fold out kind of the way that we intended them to, right? And so, here I am more on the tech side of things. But after graduating college, worked in construction management for a little bit. That's also, like real estate, a super antiquated space that is just worth, so many trillions of dollars that it's been really hard to penetrate from a technology perspective. The projects that I was working on were anywhere from $150 to $1 billion, and we're still doing things with spreadsheets. These are federally funded projects. They're projects that end up usually being delayed. And
just pivot to Asana and save millions of dollars.
Well, it's just insane. I mean, it gets to the point of like, two of the biggest problems that I'm interested in solving from not only like a technology perspective, but someday hopefully from like an investor perspective is how do we make things cheaper to build, more efficient to build, so we can build that sort of next generation of infrastructure? And how do we make housing cheaper to build? How do we make it easier for us to build housing?
More accessible,
and that's something that I think everybody can understand and get behind. From an
implementation
implementation perspective, selling real estate can be hard for exactly that reason. It's that it's a very kind of tech backwards industry. Yeah. A lot of times, a lot of the people that we talk to, they don't necessarily have a technology budget, or if they do, it's already used up, or it's just too small to really implement something that's going to be game changing. And the other side of real estate is that it's very much still kind of a good old boys network.
Yep.
It's a lot about just who do you know, who knows you, what sort of relationships do you have, and it kind of has to be that way because it's such a fragmented market, it's such a localized market. But that said, I think that those that really adopt technology are going to be the ones that really supercharge their gains and lock them in for the longer term and can also just really live that dream of passive generational wealth.
Well said, and couldn't agree more. We talk about it all. I mean, what were you just saying at the start in the open? Technology and systems, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why you guys can get so much done with so few people.
Hope so. And it's also, I mean, again, go back, beginning of the episode, Jack just hit on it. You are leveraging up. And you're doing it utilizing, different tools and resources within 1124 properties.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So staying with that vein, what are some of the other things you have going on? Because I know you have a lot going on right now. What's, from the writing, from the sharing, from the other entrepreneurial standpoint, what else do you want to share with the community as we're jumping into here? Where can basically people can share this kind of investor mindset and startup mindset you've gone through? Because I think that's so important and something we want to touch on.
Yeah, so, absolutely. No, I
put you on the spot here, but I know we're gonna get it right out there. You know?
Sure. No, it's there's a couple different things, and I think it really comes back to the theme of the podcast is tell us why. Why is it that we spend so much time trying to build our vision, and why do we spend so much time trying to accomplish so many different things? And it's really just a function of what sort of legacy do you want to leave? Like what do you want to? How do you want to inspire other people? What sort of life do you want to leave for your family? What sort of legacy do you want to leave? That's something that I think everybody that listens to this podcast can understand.
I appreciate that.
And so that said, one thing that I work on is I do a ton of writing. I do a lot of different podcasts. This is definitely the most professional one that I've ever done. And
thank you.
Just can't say enough great things about that.
Chrissy's nodding over here. Like I've been telling them it's the most professional. So
yeah, it is.
Now her rate's going up. Thanks, Carson.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
I already can't afford Jake. I mean, geez, All right.
But that said, I spend a lot of my time writing, spend a lot of my time reading. Every second of my free time, I try to do something productive with it. So I train a lot of jiu-jitsu, a lot of mixed martial arts. One of my friends has a fight coming up November 6th in Plymouth. Okay. Maybe we can link to that in the show notes
Shout
as well.
out. We'll go to it.
He's going to go professional pretty soon. My
can
man,
we sponsor him? Can we get some Tell Us Why? JJ Gee?
That'd be awesome.
Get Matt Hitchcock out there too.
Yeah. So I do a ton of martial arts. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of writing. One of my friends and I, Spencer DeWitt, formerly a Boston guy, now a Denver guy, we started the successminded.com. We write articles about excellence, about entrepreneurship, about how to learn, about things like balancing ego and humility, as well as more existential problems. I think another big thing in the entrepreneurial landscape is just having your nose to the grindstone 24 hours a day isn't really a sustainable thing for a lot of people.
Burnout's
so we talk, so we talk a lot about issues like that, like things like how do you ensure that what you're doing every day is meaningful? And so that's the sort of stuff that we get really excited by.
Okay. And what was it again? One more time. It was success.
TheSuccessminded.com.
TheSuccessminded.com. And if you can get us a link, we'll be more than happy to put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
As something to definitely touch on. And we're so big here on mindset and having that growth mindset versus that fixed mindset. I know that's something you've talked about.
1,000%.
And actually, from a learning standpoint, and as I told you previously in education, I saw it. Jack, is this something you guys have decided to break down with? Jack obviously has a child. I mean, you guys talking and going through that and implementing some of that as well, that entrepreneurial mindset as a parent. Have you looked at some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going through right now reading a book. I forget the name of it, but it's like $100 to $1 million. And it's actually a really good book. It's based for children, but there is a lot of it is based on mindset. And I keep stressing with him, like we'll read a chapter a day is basically how we're doing it. So we'll read like starting a business chapter or a mindset chapter, and like after every chapter we read, I give my input, and it's usually I found that it's been a lot on mindset. Yep. Like it is just a completely different shift. And like I was mentioning a couple weeks ago on the podcast that I gave my son shit for. I gave him shit for going to school. Is essentially what it came down to. But I'm like, how was employee training today?
Yeah.
Like it's. I mean, I joke with him, and he gets that. My wife.
How old's your son?
Maybe gets that, but 10.
10.
So,
gotta start early.
I always tell him like you're going to school to learn how to learn. Like that's all it is. Like you're getting a basic education, and what you do with it after that is up to you. Like if you want to be a real estate investor, if you want to be a professional athlete, like it's all up to you to utilize the resources readily available everywhere. YouTube, Tell Us Why community everywhere.
Yeah.
To make the best of what you have, and it's no one's responsibility but your own. So
I think it's perfect. So maybe we gotta get Cam on.
I'm
the
putting it up
success.
right now.
What is it again? The success.
Thesuccessminded.com.
We're gonna have a couple 10-year-olds on there with some comments. I like it.
Yeah, that's fine with us.
Which again, that's just unbelievable. And tying it back into the other thing we wanted to ask that we wanted to touch on, we were curious about, because we've even run into this again, selfishly doing it within development AI, within the writing space, with everything you're doing. Having to pivot your model from time to time. When we first met, it was one vision. You guys are still going there, but you've changed a little bit. What is that like going through starting a business and being flexible and being able to pivot? What is that experience like on the entrepreneur side? And again, any actionable tips or any words of wisdom we can share with the Tell Us Why community on that?
Like starting a business, it's hard. It's extremely hard. I mean, just from the decision, the thing about entrepreneurship.
It's not all Lambos and IG social media photos. I thought everyone had a Bugatti who owned a business.
That is like 0.001%, and they're leased.
That is the best comment we've had. There's your clip for this week. So,
the thing that I really struggled with transitioning away from big corporate, like my big corporate job, coming from engineering school, coming from like a good school, and having that sort of academic and then more corporate background, is that the thing about jumping ship into entrepreneurship is that there's no right answers. Yeah. You don't even, you won't know for 10 years if you made the right decision or not. Yeah. And so that said, it's like you're trying to find your way out of the woods where there's no path, and it's like you're already going down one direction, and then to pivot is to just go in a direction that you have equal visibility on, which is basically zero.
In the dark.
Great way to put it.
Completely in the dark.
Yeah, you're completely in the dark. So it's just comes down to so much of just trusting your gut, and just, especially from a tech side, especially when it's B2B, but even B2C, right? Like development AI, we sell to development companies, we sell to investment companies, we also sell to individuals, but mostly B2B. And so much of it is just listening to what your customers have to say. Because at the end of the day, as a technology platform, we're serving our customers, and everything that we do needs to be with them in mind. We need to focus relentlessly on them, because they're the ones that are going to pay our bills and keep the lights on.
Such a great way to put
so
it.
that said, if we're doing things that aren't serving the customers, then there's sort of little micro pivots that we make, right? Like there's a button that's over here. Maybe we're just going to put it down here because we see that they engage with it more. But on the more macro side, like changing a whole business model, that really just has to come from, number one, super informed feedback from customers directly. Number two, industry and market knowledge, being able to kind of determine which way things might go. Granted, nobody can predict the future. Again, it's kind of like being in the wilderness and trying to find your way out. But three is really just having the courage to do it. There's not. I mean, you just have to have the faith that it's the right move, and also have the grace for yourself if you're wrong.
I like that. I like that. Go back and listen to that. So many good nuggets of knowledge in there. I love it. With that, it's time to put him on the hot seat.
Let's do it.
All right. We're about to ask them the big three.
So we got a new question this week that we're going to throw at you. So before we get to that, you want to hear from our QS advisors?
I think we should.
It's now time for the Big Three segment, brought to you by QS Private Lending. Are you looking to finance your next deal quickly and reliably with less hassle and paperwork? QS Private Lending is one of the oldest and largest hard money lenders to real estate investors in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Our quick and simple short-term loans require no appraisals and have enabled hundreds of builders and investors to profitably acquire and renovate thousands of residential and commercial properties. To experience the QS difference for yourself, call or text Luke Conroy today at 315-323-0250. That's 315-323-0250. QS Private Lending.
Okay, so we wanted to add a new twist on the question segment.
And Carson's our guinea pig.
Sorry, we're throwing it at you. But basically add a little bit more value for our listeners. I think it would be a valuable resource. So our new question is, what book or resource would you recommend to our listeners?
I think, so my favorite book of all time is called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Yep.
Ooh, new one.
Peter Thiel is, he was one of the founders of PayPal. So he and Elon Musk, they got together and they formed PayPal, exited very profitably, obviously.
IRA billionaire.
Yeah, exactly. And then Peter Thiel also made the first major investment in Facebook. So he put in $500,000, got 10% of the company, sold it when it went public, made billions of dollars. And now he runs Thiel Capital. He runs Palantir. He has a bunch of other business interests. Someone who's just all about thinking differently. And the book 0 to 1 is just all about distinguishing what's a 0 to 1 moment in business and in life versus a 1 to N moment in business or life. And so what that means is 1 to N is like, I've got money, I'm trying to make a certain interest rate on it, et cetera, et cetera. I can predict with some reliability of what that's going to be worth, call it 10, 15, 20 years. 0 to 1 moment is like, I'm going to create something new that hasn't existed before, where the ROI can't be determined because you're dividing by 0. And it's just all about how do you think differently. It's not so much entrepreneurship in tech is not so much how do we take what's already there and make it better. That's definitely a part of it, but that's 1 to N. 0 to 1 is how do I create something new that hasn't existed before.
Yep.
And so the reason that I like that book so much is that it just turns all these conventional notions on its head and really just gives you a completely different angle to think of things from. It's a book I've read probably 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
And it's incredible.
I'm hopping on a flight to Scottsdale later today, and I will be checking that one out. It's going on the Kindle, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
That's how I first read it too on Kindle.
In our show notes.
Good.
I hope you can Chrissy all these show notes. There's a lot of references today. I don't want to get yelled at. All right, so I got your back. People at home, this is all on Jack. So with that,
moving on to the big 3.
Hit them with it. Let's go. This is going to be interesting.
These are the 3 questions we ask every guest every week, and the first question is, in your opinion, is college worth it?
I think.
It's like, is my mother listening?
Well, no, I was going to say, I think the biggest question is who's paying for it. Is it something that you're getting for free, or is it something that you have to pay for? And then if so, how much are you paying?
You definitely thought this through before you came on. He was ready.
To be fair, I saw it like a couple minutes ago. I was like, I don't know. It can get me in trouble. I think, Jack, you said something earlier about just how resources are, it's really just what you do with the resources, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you could go to a great school that's cheap. You could go to a great school that's expensive. There are certain alumni networks that could benefit you, right? Like, we have a mutual friend, Felipe. He went to the best school, in my opinion, and he's now able to leverage, incredible connections through that network.
Tech startup and everything else.
Right. So I think a lot of it just depends on, number one, what do you want to do, right? Like if you're going to do something that you can learn in a textbook, probably not a good idea to make the investment, especially as like an 18-year-old kid. You're going to be saddled with debt if you are the one that's paying for it. So I think it really just depends on what do you want to do, what are the long-term outlooks of and prospects of that job market, who's paying for it, how much is it going to cost. And at the end of the day, I don't know if those are really decisions that people who are 18 years old are capable of making intelligently.
Yeah.
Very well said. Perfect transition. Speaking of 18, what is one piece of actionable advice you go back and give your 18-year-old self?
That one I didn't see on the paper.
Now you gotta it gets even worse. Don't worry.
A piece of advice I would tell myself when I was 18, I would tell myself that the world's a lot bigger than you think it is.
Okay, expand on that.
So what I mean by that is, so up until the time that I was, call it 21 or 22, I'm 26 now. When I was 21 or 22, somewhere around junior year of college, my family moved from New Jersey to Pittsburgh, where they're originally from. A lot of that was my dad's jobs prospects were changing. I didn't really have any family in the area to begin with. And I still had to finish out my last year and a half at Rutgers, also in New Jersey, half a mile down the road. My freshman, sophomore, junior year, I could basically go home on the weekends. I lived with people that were from the same town as me. I just didn't really have like a broad horizon. But that all changed for me when my parents moved out to Pittsburgh, where I was like, wow, I can live and do whatever I want. There's no family here tying me down. There's no reason that I really needed to stay in New Jersey in the first place. There's no reason why I have to have friends that are from the same hometown as me. So that same year, I ended up living with a bunch of people that I had never known before. The year after, and I started traveling to conferences. I traveled for all kinds of different things, and that's just really expanded my horizons. I was like, wow, I can really do and live kind of anywhere that I wanted to.
Wow.
So after I graduated, I moved out to Denver, lived there for a little bit, moved to Boston, been there for close to 4 years now. And I probably would have moved elsewhere, but I just love this area so much that I don't really think I ever will move from here.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I think it's just expand your horizons. You don't have to go to engineering school and then work as an engineer. You don't have to like quit your job and go do real estate if that's not like what you really want to do. Just think bigger, think broader.
And get out of that bucket. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, now we're gonna hit him with a hard one.
So here's a difficult one. What is one thing you would want your 90-year-old self to say to you? Pressure's on.
I would want my 90-year-old self to tell me. Well, I think about this might be kind of morbid, but I think as human beings we think about death a lot and about existentialism, why it is that we're here. And I think a lot too about how there's so many people that'll talk about, like say for instance someone who works in a nursing home or someone who's a nurse in like a a unit where a lot of people are older and they're kind of on their way out, and they talk about the regrets, right? Like they talk about, wish I spent more time with family. I wish I went for it. I wish I did this and that. And I think at the end of the day, I want that 90-year-old person, a version of myself, if I'm lucky enough to get there, to really just tell me, like, there's nothing that I regret. And that I just lived in accordance with my values. I did it with the people that I love. I did business with the people that I love. And I left no stone unturned, didn't say no to any challenge, and just lived courageously and full of intent and left my mark.
Definitely go back and listen to that. That was one of the best ones we've had. Carson, you delivered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any parting words for the Tell Us Why community? Any actionable words? You want to give them any words of advice?
Yeah, I think, one thing that we didn't touch on that I do a lot of is jiu-jitsu and martial arts. And that's really all kind of predicated. The farther that I've gone in this sport, the more that I've learned that I really don't actually know all that much about anything. And the more that I've realized the importance of learning from people that have walked the walk, that have talked the talk, that have been down the same path before. Yeah. So I think to the community here, I think it's really just, if you're not in the same position that Mike and Jack are in, and you want to get there, then keep listening to these guys. Keep listening to the people that have been down that path, if that's truly where you want to go. The importance of surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals, with people that are on a trajectory farther than yours, is just like probably the most important thing that I've learned in as long as I've been doing business, which granted isn't that long. But that said, it's like
makes the growth that much more impressive, you know.
But that's what makes the impact. That's what's brought me the most value, is just being able to network and connect with people that are on a similar path or that are already farther down than me. It's just something that's so inspirational, right? So like really take inventory of the people that are in your life, take inventory to the content that you consume, and just double down on what's working and double down on who's really like a good fit for you.
Total accountability.
That's right.
1,000% agree with everything you just said.
That is great. That is unbelievable.
Tell the people where they can find out more information about you.
Yeah, LinkedIn is good. Instagram is good. thesuccessminded.com. I'm also going to be launching just carsonhess.com, firstlast.com, where I bring in kind of everything. I want to write more about venture capital, investing, technology.
Great stuff.
Trends in real estate.
Yep.
And just bring it all under one umbrella.
I like
awesome.
it.
All right, where can they learn more about us?
So if you don't already follow us on social media, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. We haven't put up anything yet, but we will.
He keeps promising.
My bad.
And
basically every social media platform there is, all the links are in the description below. And if you're new and just listening for the first time, please head over to YouTube and subscribe.
Or Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you get your audio podcasts. If you also want to come check us out in person, we record most Wednesdays in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, and we'd love to have you come check us out.
Wrap it up with the quote of the week. So Mario Andretti, if everything is under control, you're going too slow. Boom.
I love that.
I like that one.
That's awesome.
That's it for today, so be sure to join us next week for next week's episode. And until then,
bet on yourself.
I can't read.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.